ASEAN is a political grouping of 10 countries, and Singapore is one of them. And Malaysia, Indonesia, Philippines, Laos, Myanmar is of course the latest member. It's a rich grouping, an economic and investment center. So it's got free trade, no customs, no trade barriers between all the 10 countries. And investors and companies are now increasingly looking at it as a one destination. You probably know Asia better for India and China. And squeezed between the two is Southeast Asia. So that's what ASEAN is. It's an association of Southeast Asian. It's the ASEAN Economic Community. It's a bit of what the EU is about. Investors are looking at this and saying, we ought to be diversifying, we ought to be putting some money into ASEAN as a bloc. So it's so important for us as a legal practice to look at ASEAN as our immediate market, and certainly not just Singapore. Japanese banks have taken note of that and started private equity funds. They call it the ASEAN Fund. It's dedicated to investing just in ASEAN. And they are doing it not just for themselves, they're doing it to generate the interest among Japanese companies to come and invest in Southeast Asia. We're seeing that being done, and we've been leading a couple of those transactions. Today, and we'll be able to export your goods all around the 10 countries, 600 million consumers, no trade barriers, or very little, and they'll be down to zero according to the program. And in terms of investments, ASEAN stands out as one region. On its own, 10 different countries may be too disparate and small, may not be on the radar screen of large global companies. But as a grouping of 10 countries with 600 million, I think it's a powerful force. Malaysia and Singapore shares a lot of cultural similarities. There are a lot of business connections, so the ties are very close. And given the pressure on cost, and in a small island like Singapore, we do see a lot of Singapore companies, particularly small and medium-sized enterprises, relocating to Malaysia. So Singapore now stands as one of the largest investors in Malaysia. We are seeing multinationals relocating whatever manufacturing they have into Malaysia. So there's a lot of restructuring of the kind of investments they have. Singapore is now more or less the service center, the financial headquarters for these corporations. And a lot of the manufacturing, logistics stuff are now being done out of Malaysia. Land is scarce in Singapore, very expensive. And actually the government supports that relocation. The government is saying that we need this land for higher value investments, for research and development. And therefore they are actually supporting small and medium enterprises to make that move to Malaysia. And Malaysia is of course a logical choice, it's just a drive across. If you look at the ASEAN region, Singapore is probably the most advanced in the banking and financial institutions. Most global banks are there, most big financial institutions are there. And not surprisingly, private equity is there. But they don't really just look at Singapore. They are there in Singapore to look for business, to invest in the ASEAN region. ASEAN is 10 different countries. So the potential for aviation in Southeast Asia is tremendous. And this has supported the growth of many low-cost carriers. We at Bird & Bird, we are very proud to be representing some of the leading names in this low-cost carrier. And we have been doing work for them, advising them in setting up the alliance airlines in the region. The kind of work that we do is to service these multinationals in Singapore. And on top of that, the local companies in Singapore who are looking at ASEAN as a region. We will then, of course, help them in their corporate staff, in their intellectual property, in all the kinds of work that a full-service law firm would do.